Why, hello, ladies and gentlemen. On today's show, it's fantasy time. That's right, all fantasy, everything, some would say. We are talking Padres players for fantasy baseball with a good old buddy of mine. To my left, right, I don't really know what the thing is exactly, but
this way.
everybody, it's going to be a blast. We're talking who to draft, should Tatis go number one, who you shouldn't draft from the Padres team, all that good stuff, and more. Locked On Padres, you know what it is. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Why, greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Padres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, for Friday, February 25th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can find me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno, or at LO_Padres if you want exclusively Padres-centric content, because I tend to tweet about a whole bunch of things, including backgrounds of the Sonic the Hedgehog games, whatever. But if you want Padres stuff, you can go check that out there. As always, thank you for making Locked On Padres your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And today's episode is a very special one. It is a returning guest who I think has been on the pod. I'm going to say twice. I don't know if it's twice. This is either the second time or the third time.
I think this is the second time.
The second time. The first time we talked back about Blake Snell and how he had a really great kind of bounce back at the end of the year and whether or not he's going to continue that in 2022. But today we're going to be talking about all Padres stuff. You heard him just talking a little bit now. My good buddy Colby Olson over at Just Baseball. Sir, how you doing on this fine Friday morning?
What's up? I'm hyped to be back here. Hyped to talk Padres because, honestly, I've always been a Padres supporter. I'm not going to call myself a fan, but I'm a supporter of their brand. Their jerseys are sick. The team is just a fun team to root for. And they're always on that West Coast slot. So it's who do you watch late at night? I'm a Red Sox fan right here.
Yeah,
I watch the Padres because they're fun, man. They're fun. But
they're very fun.
Get into fantasy, I kind of have a question for you. I just kind of want to feel out what is your current vibe on the 2022 Padres? How are you feeling about them, and what is their direction after the lockout ends, free agency or trade?
I think
just give me the quick.
So synopsis. It's funny because as we are literally chatting, there's a bunch of people the Locked On Padres mentions who are going back and forth on trading for Matt Olson, which I think is. There's just too much to unpack there, I think, in a lot of ways. I do feel like there's some optimism. I just feel like so much went wrong. That's kind of where I am right now, where, all right, yeah, Tatis was great. Machado was great. The guys you expect, but there were so many players who didn't just regress. They became below replacement. And I feel like there's some positive regression to be expected to just at least be average players with the case of someone like Snell, with the case of someone like Darvish. Everybody was so bad in the second half. I'm at least expecting them to, maybe be an 88-win team, and they have vibes similar to when they're heading into the 2020 season, where everything was on the down. Everyone was like, oh no, Machado, his first year, it's a bust. What are we going to do? Everybody's losing their minds, even though he still hit 34 bombs that year. And then look what happens, and they become the team that they are now. So I'm fairly optimistic, man. I'm fairly optimistic. The bigger problem is the division. I'm more worried about the division than I am about the actual team. I cannot actually get a feel for San Fran right now. I still think they're good, but there's just something. 107 wins. You know what I mean? There's something about them that is
they're going to
tough
regress.
For me to. Yeah,
I'll bet money on the Padres finishing above the Giants next season.
Oh, that's what I like to hear. Hey, Swolby Olson coming in with the takes, everybody. But we're not talking about primarily the Padres in a real baseball sense today. We're going to be talking fantasy. And I want to talk about fantasy because fantasy baseball is something I am addicted to for better and, to be honest with you, usually worse. But I wanted to talk to you because over at Just Baseball, you just launched a podcast, Not Gambling Advice, which includes stuff maybe related to gambling. Not entirely gambling. It isn't gambling advice, but it has to do with lines and all that stuff. And you guys have also been talking about fantasy. And you've been putting out, top 10 catchers, top 20 catchers, top 50 first baseman or whatever. And you guys have been breaking that down. So I figured you're a big fantasy expert. you're a degenerate fantasy person like myself, so why not have you on to talk about Padres players heading into this 2022 season? Because we just talked about a lot of players regressed last year. It was a lot of disappointment for the most part. And I want to see, who do you think are going to be sleepers and whatnot in this draft? Who do you think are players you don't want to draft? But the first question I think we have to ask, because this is how you do programming and content, folks, I got to talk about Fernando Tatis Jr. Do you think he is the first overall pick in fantasy baseball for 2022?
So we debated on this one on the Just Baseball show a couple weeks ago, and to tell you the truth, I don't know. I think that Fernando Tatis, if healthy, if he has 600 plate appearances, 650 plate appearances, is in the lineup every single day, or at least 150 games, he is going to be the best fantasy baseball player in the game. But there is that risk that he does not play 150 games because of that shoulder, right? And so with your first overall pick, you need to nail that. Like, it doesn't need to be the best player, like, at 1-1. You just need that player to play every day at an elite level. And if your first overall pick misses 100 games or 50 games or whatever it may be, that could be detrimental to your squad. So right now, I am leaning Trey Turner. But Tatis is right there. And right now, as we look at it, if you go by ADP, Tatis is being taken basically even with Trey Turner. So like, even the experts are split on this. Like, nobody's calling Tatis bad, but I think people are just a little bit worried about that shoulder injury. And it's a fair take. I think if I got first overall pick, I think I'm leaning Turner. But if I end up with Fernando Tatis, who has the potential to hit 40 home runs, even 50 home runs in a full season, plus he could steal 30 to 40 bags, which you're not getting from anybody else that's hitting 40 or 50 home runs. Like, he is without a doubt could have one of the best fantasy baseball seasons we've ever seen. Like Mike Trout level fantasy seasons we're talking here.
Yeah, like I remember, just to reference your old Boston Red Sox, I remember Jacoby Ellsbury's 30-30 year. For those who don't understand, 30 home runs, 30 stolen bases. Stolen bases carry a lot of weight in fantasy baseball. Same thing to a degree with RBIs and runs. And I think that, with Trey Turner, with that Dodgers lineup, you feel very comfortable. He's going to be smack dab in the middle. He's going to score. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he scores like 120 runs this year. He's going to hit for, I think, a lot more power than people realize. You know what I'm saying? Did he overperform last year? Yes, but 20, 25 home runs, I mean, at the minimum, is pretty solid.
A 30 home run guy.
I think he's a 30 home run guy?
I think he really is. I think he hits the ball as hard as other guys that hit, 30 home runs, and launch angle or fly ball percentage rates for him are within line with guys that hit that many home runs. I think that's a sustainable number for him. But yeah, I think he's just the safe guy there. And let's be real here. You cannot even begin to try to project injuries. Like, you're just it's an impossible task. But obviously
Turner was injured for a little bit. Yeah.
Injury prone, and Turner could as well. I mean, it comes with the territory of stealing a lot of bases too, right? You're putting your body at risk by sliding into second or third or even home. So
I think the big thing with Tatis versus some other guys, like you said, injuries are of course random, and you have to look at a player's history and stuff like that. But with Tatis, I think there's something about knowing he has the shoulder thing that is why, because it's like, that this literally can pop up at any time. With Trey Turner, or God forbid any other player, something could just happen. But there's something about literally knowing and expecting almost by almost everybody's projections that Tatis could probably miss you like 20, 30 games, like hopefully at the minimum, right? Like hopefully it's nothing crazy. But like you said, with the power combination, he's not killing you in batting average, despite what some people may think because of the strikeout rate, gets on base if you're in on base percentage league. So yeah, I agree with you, man. I think that in a lot of ways, I'm going to be taking Tatis first overall for obvious reasons, and also because it's just objectively more fun, I think, for a lot of people to have him on his team. And I think that that's one thing I would caution people is, if you want to win, Trey Turner, out of all the top 5 picks, not necessarily the most exciting player out of the bunch, because you've got your Juan Soto and him doing the dances at home plate and all that stuff. You've got Shohei Ohtani, who's probably around there. You've got Vlad Jr. Do not sleep on the fact that Trey Turner can potentially just win you steals outright, which is one of the hardest things to find in fantasy baseball for sure.
All I think of now when I think of Trey Turner is that swaggy slide he had last year.
That is true. He did have that. That was amazing. That was amazing. That just for that GIF alone, maybe he's a lot more excited than people think, guys. But one thing that I know no one will debate on, or at least they might if they're fools, right? Is what are the best protein bars, my friend, in the whole galaxy, just on the planet, not just in this country or whatever, the whole galaxy, guys. Those are Built bars. All right. Forget about arguing about Trey Turner and Fernando Tatis Jr. These things are not to be argued about. It's the time of year when most people give up on their resolutions and whatnot, but fear not. If you're struggling with that, you can go check out Built bars because they kind of satisfy that sweet tooth for you. All right. They've also got these Built Bar Puff things, which are kind of have that Almond Joy energy to them. If you're Almond Joy fans, they're a lot more lighter. They're really good. Check out the macros: 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Well, I mean, I don't really have to. You get it, all right? You're saving a lot when you do the Built Bars and whatnot. And what I love about them the most, great variety of flavors: mint brownie, coconut almonds, white chocolate cookies and cream is new this month. They've got eggnog and gingerbread. My buddy Colby knows I am no stranger to trying out new flavors of things. And what I love about them is just, aside from being different, they all taste good, guys. Seriously, I've literally had like basically every single Built Bar flavor that they've had. And because you're listening to this podcast, guys, I have a deal for you. Go to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Remember, promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Colby, we're back. We're back at it. All right. We talked about Tatis. All right. Now we got to talk about the rest of the Padres because, in fairness, the Padres, a lot of them got drafted highly in fantasy baseball last year with people like Trent Grisham, with people like Manny Machado, obviously. You had Blake Snell, who was a top 15 sort of pitcher who was being taken. Joe Musgrove ended up being the sleeper. Even Chris Paddock was drafted high to a certain extent. Let's start first with, who do you think is kind of a big sleeper when it comes to Padres being drafted this year, based on their projections, where they're currently ranked and whatnot? You know, everybody who's familiar with fantasy football, Matthew Berry does his love-hate thing. This doesn't necessarily mean you think that the player will be outright bad, but you just don't quite like where they're being ranked necessarily. And in this case, who do you think? Who think's a big sleeper for the Padres?
Well, I think there's. I don't know if there's necessarily like a big sleeper here, but one guy that I'm really, really interested in this year is Yu Darvish. Yu Darvish had somewhat of a down year last year and got roughed up back when the the sticky stuff was going on after that. After that crackdown. But I really like him going into this year. He's being drafted around the 100th pick and actually 20 picks below just Joe Musgrove. I have Yu Darvish and Joe Musgrove literally back to back in my pitching rankings right now, about the 20th spot, I believe. Yeah, I have Yu Darvish ranked 18th. 18th best fantasy pitcher, right in line with Joe Musgrove. I think Yu Darvish is a great pick this year, and I think he's going to have a bounce back year. Another guy that I really like as a flyer late in drafts, he's being drafted around the 300th selection, is Chris Paddock. Chris Paddock got roughed up with his fastball, but I think going into now his, fourth year in the league already. 2 years ago, I was like the biggest Chris Paddock supporter there ever was drafting him.
I think a lot of people were,
high. And this is a guy that could provide you with a whip close to 1. And I think this year is the year he has an ERA below 4. If he's a guy that has a 3.6, 3.7 ERA, I think that's still very fantasy relevant. And I think he'll strike out close to 9 guys, per 9.
That's a good point, because bringing up the ADP is so important here with Chris Paddock, where it's kind of like, again, don't go into your draft being like, Chris Paddock's my guy. But when you think about it, there at least seems like I talk about this with the Padres a lot, where it's not inconceivable that Chris Paddock can provide you a good season. Again, this is fantasy. Does this mean he'll be an amazing pitcher for the rest of his career? No, but hey, I'm old enough to remember when I drafted like Alfredo Simone back in the day, who had like an incredible first half and then was bad. Maybe Paddock is a first half guy, but bottom line is he's still got talent. And he could be a guy that gets you some decent amount of strikeouts. And like you said with the whip, Chris Paddock, the one thing he didn't do last year is walk a lot of guys, which was really awesome.
He
To be
never
honest with you.
has.
He did not.
Never been a
he
walk
never
guy.
has. And he was elite with it last year. Yes, the control can be a little bit odd when locating the fastball, but he's a walk people, right? Yes, he might give up that 3-run home run, but he's not giving you a free base. But I think that's a great point also about Yu Darvish, where yeah, he fell back last year. And a lot of people who drafted him were really happy until the sticky stuff and the second half. For the first half, he got you plenty of wins. He got you a really great ERA and whip and the strikeouts. For me, I think with strikeouts is another reason I'd be drafting Darvish. And in fairness, 180p isn't that bad. It's not like he's being left on the scrap heap. Because of the strikeout potential, I think alone, especially in today's game, you have to start considering Darvish. And I think with Musgrove is a great point. Do you think Musgrove, are you still in on that guy? Because you said that they're kind of back to back. Do you still think he's going to be a viable starting pitcher for you this season?
Yeah, absolutely. I love Musgrove as well. I was just merely pointing out that, there's a big disparity between Musgrove and Darvish's ADPs right now. And at the current value they're being taken at, yeah, I'm all over Darvish over Musgrove for that reason. But I'm also all over Musgrove having an even better year than he had. And he had a really, really good year. But back to Darvish real quick is, he had a 4.22 ERA, which for him just seems way too high. xERA was 3.35. The other xFIP stats were, in the mid to high threes. And, it was clear that just something wasn't right. But I think with a winter to train, knowing that there's no sticky stuff next year, Darvish is going to come back and have a fine year. I think the biggest question mark for the Padres right now, and maybe you can shine some light for me here, is who the hell is going to close baseball games for you guys?
Yes. I mean, that's the big thing. And in fantasy, when you're trying to get saves, I don't know about you, but I tend to just be like, I'll draft a guy that I think is cool, maybe in the middle of the draft, maybe. Otherwise, I just play closer carousel for the rest of the year, and I just try and find the guys that are going to get you saves. But with the Padres, I mean, it's a good question, right? Because the Padres are still expected to be a good team. There will be save opportunities. And initially, we all thought last year it was going to be Drew Pomeranz heading into the season. He is their big ticket money reliever, and he was on the team, and he was great. But instead, it went to Mark Melancon, who was one of the better pickups in fantasy last year because you got him so low in the draft. And he was awesome. He saved a lot of games, not as many in the first half, but still, he was awesome. Even if he didn't get you some great strikeout stats and all that. Bottom line is he closed out games pretty effectively. This year, I mean, Robert Suarez is in the mix. Unfortunately, in my opinion, Emilio Pagan is probably in the mix because Drew Pomeranz is still hurt. So there's just a lot of questions around that. I think this could become one of those situations where we find out more in spring training and the regular season. So I would not, where you do not draft whoever is projected as the Padres closer. I would not do that because people are going to try and chase those saves because they know that there's going to be a lot of them with the Padres, but you just don't know. It could be Pierce Johnson. Heck, they might even throw in what's his face, Austin Adams, who hits, Dinelson Lamet, who is potentially a guy that they might turn into a long-term reliever, or maybe they want him to be a wipeout closer. I don't know. There's a lot of questions with the Padres bullpen, even though there's like some good players in there. But I think that there's no clear-cut guy right now. I mean, like I said, Robert Suarez, he throws like in the hundreds, and they just brought him over, who was pitching the Japanese baseball league, right? So like he might be the guy, right? They like him. They signed him to a decent deal. Luis Garcia that they brought over. I just think that there's a lot of questions, and they don't have a Kenley Jansen or a another shutdown closer like a Hader in there where this is the guy that's going to get saves.
I mean, to me, it makes sense to go trade for Kimbrel. Bring Kimbrel back. Get your guy. I think that's like the main question mark for you guys aside from fantasy, right? The main question mark for the Padres right now is who's going to close baseball games. And I think Dinelson Lamet is a super solid choice there too. I think in a 1-inning role, that slider, who is one of the best sliders in all of baseball, in a 1-inning role, that would be electric. I mean, he's going to hit 100 regularly. So yeah, Dinelson Lamet is actually being drafted as the number 1 relief pitcher for the Padres right now. I don't think he's going to start next year. Pierce Johnson is after him. So yeah, I agree with you though, Javi. I think staying away from any closer options here is probably the move.
Because you never know. Again, you never know. You might get cheap. Look, and teams aren't always super smart. Shouts to Bob Melvin. Love the guy. I imagine he's going to do a great job. But hey, I remember watching Fernando Rodney past his prime with like a 5 ERA closing out games for like Seattle or whatever. And that's why you had to draft him every year, because they kept giving him the close your experience thing. Whether or not that's valid or invalid, sometimes I think it's valid, but sometimes teams just like having the guy that's had experience. So be careful, Padres fans. Emilio Pagan could be a guy, maybe at the beginning until he flounders a bit, that closes out games. But so yeah, I wouldn't bet on kind of the Padres closer when you're heading into your draft. But something I think that we need to talk about really quickly with betting is where to go when it comes to all your betting stuff, right? Which site has all the best odds, all the best player performance props, or where the next fired coach is going to land? That's betonline.net, guys. Football might be over for the season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. I know you're a big fan of the old college hoops, despite your alumni. What's that called? Your alma mater. There we go. Alma mater not being the best of college hoops lately. Alumnus school. But BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And of course, not just basketball, guys. They've got you covered in hockey, boxing, UFC, Olympic coverage. They've probably got you Oscars bets, the bane of my existence, the Academy Awards, but they've got bets and whatnot for you. Head to the website today, use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Colby, let's get into the more controversial areas of fantasy baseball. And that's Padres players that you think are getting overdrafted, or ones that you're kind of staying away from based on their ranking. Again, this does not mean that you necessarily think they will have a bad season, but it means, I just don't like them there. I like more guys around their average draft position. What do you think? What do you got for me?
One guy that I cannot get a gauge on is Mike Clevenger, who did not pitch last year due to Tommy John surgery. And I think a lot of Padres fans are super excited about Mike Clevenger coming back, and I am too. I think when he's healthy, he's he's a close to top 20 pitcher. I would say top 30 to 40 pitcher is well within reason for Mike Clevenger, and had an amazing finish in 2020 with Cleveland.
Yeah. At the time that they acquired him, he had one of the 5 lowest ERAs in baseball.
Yeah. The one thing I'm very worried about him is, right now, if you look, he is being drafted 197 ADP, but he is being drafted as high as 106th and as low as 285th. Wow. So there's nobody can really get a gauge on how to value Mike Clevenger. The problem here is that Mike Clevenger in his career has only pitched 200 innings once. And beyond that, I think his next highest season was like 134 innings. So Mike Clevenger coming,
to be exact.
What is it?
126 to be exact. That was in 2019.
Yeah, exactly. So to bet on Mike Clevenger to throw more than 126 innings, if that, in 2022, I think you're being very, very aggressive. And he could come back and throw 200 innings, right? Guys come back and recover from Tommy John all the time. But April, May, even into June, I think the Padres are going to be very, very careful with the way that they use Mike Clevenger, because they have a ton of pitching depth too. Like, they don't need to throw Mike Clevenger out there for 6 or 7 innings in a start. Like, they can throw him 4 innings and throw somebody else like Dinelson Lamet, piggyback him, right? So yeah, I'm staying far, far away from Mike Clevenger. I mean, if he falls to 285th, like, take him. Please take him, but do not take him in the first 200 picks. I am not taking him in the first 200 picks.
And if you just want to read the tea leaves and whatnot, the Padres have not been good when it comes to injuries to pitchers. They've had a lot of them. A lot of people think that Yu Darvish's injury last year might have affected him. Whether or not that's true is one thing. But, Dinelson Lamet, we lose Adrian Morejon last year for basically literally the whole season, right? There's been a lot of injuries, and I just think trying to buy in. If you knew that Mike Clevenger could come in there and he'd give you, at least maybe even just 160 innings, right? Even if it was just 160 innings, get you a decent amount of wings, get you some elite strikeout stuff. He did have 200 Ks his last fully healthy season, then 169 the year after. He could be great. His whip stuff, and like I said, at the time they acquired him, since 2017 was the stat that it was Kershaw, Scherzer, DeGrom, and one other guy, and then Mike Clevenger for the lowest ERA marks. He does have the upside, but I'm with you, man. I just think that I can see this going poorly if you draft him too highly. Like you said, as high as the hundreds, I'd rather just take Darvish and go. You know what I mean? To take you Darvish, know that you'll get at least some good strikeout stuff from him, maybe some regression, some positive regression. But yeah, Clevenger's a weird one. It is exciting that he's back for the team, but excitement for him being back to the team doesn't always mean fantasy success. Remember, we have to take into account wins. Like you said, 4 innings, that won't classify him for wins. So he might be a good pitcher for you, maybe even at your ERA and whip. But I just don't see it, man. I don't see it as being a viable top level option. And I just rather wait, draft some more offense, maybe draft a guy for steals even, then go.
So Javi, this is another one for you that you might be able to shine some light on. Sorry, you were lagging there for a bit. I might have cut you off.
It's all right. This happens sometimes. It happens. Go for it.
But obviously I don't watch every Padres game, so I'm just seeing a lot of these numbers, right? Trent Grisham last year was not his best offensively, but one question mark I have about him is his stolen base numbers. He stole 10 bags in 250 plate appearances in the 2020 season, and yet he only stole 13 and 550 plate appearances last year. So the difference between 25 bags for Trent Grisham and 13 bags is massive. So can you maybe shine some light on why he wasn't stealing as many bags last year?
I think that it's funny because the entire Padres team just stopped swiping bags, which is one thing that was really frustrating because they were actually winning when they were a little bit more aggressive on the base pass and being, like I said, you even had Jake Cronenworth had like a couple ones, and Jake Cronenworth is not a very good base runner. Manny Machado had a 3-steal game against the Dodgers at one point. Like there was a lot of running early on. They were aggressive and it worked. And then all of a sudden they just kind of stopped. Whether that was for injuries, maybe in the case of Tatis, who then started sliding feet first and whatnot instead of with the arm, which was smart and it still worked out. So don't worry about Tatis in that department. But I think a lot of people thought this was a 25-20 guy. And that did not happen. At the beginning, he was amazing. I mean, I remember his first, I think it was against the Rangers when he came into the season, hit a home run in his first game, right? He was awesome. He was stealing bags. And then he only ends up with 13. And he strikes out a whole lot, and he's not going to help you really in batting average. No. Maybe there's a universe if you play in an on-base percentage league, maybe he gets you 350, something like that, something that's a little bit more attainable. But that's the thing with Grisham is his counting stats with the home runs and the stolen bases are going to be the big value. And I'm worried about him. You would peg him initially as a guy who's going to bounce back and say, come on, 13 home runs, like 13 stolen bases. He's got to be better than that, right? He's got to give you at least 20-20. But I don't know. In today's fantasy landscape, I just think that there are more sure things. Watching Grisham bat, I know he can hit, but man, those like inside fastballs seem to just kill him sometimes. And it's just frustrating. He swings through pitches. It wasn't as bad as like watching Tommy Pham last year, but even still, Grisham, yeah, I would take a chance on him depending on where he's being drafted. But I just think a lot of people think it's going to be a surefire bounce back. Could score a decent amount of runs, but like I said, that batting average is probably going to hurt you. So just leverage expectations. If he's a 20-20 guy and that's what you want from him, then yes, but don't expect the superstar output as a like top 55-ish pick that I think he was going last year.
Yeah, so this year he's going as like a top 130 guy. We have him ranked as our 37th ranked our outfielder. And that's kind of in line with what everybody else has him. He's the 36th ranked outfielder by ADP. But yeah, I mean, I'm not really gonna like chase Trent Grisham here. Another guy that is somewhat interesting because I think he's close to being a top 5 second baseman in real life, but he doesn't even crack the top 10 in our second base rankings. Is Jake Cronenworth? I think you would agree that Jake Cronenworth at his best is one of the best second basemen in baseball. But from a fantasy perspective, he just does not add enough batting average wise, counting stat wise. He does add some stolen bags, but it's not enough. We have him as our 14th ranked second baseman behind Edman, Jazz Chisholm, Jonathan India, Brandon Lau, those guys. So I think give me your thoughts there.
That's a tough one because like some people might be thinking, well, what the heck? He's more consistent. He can play multiple positions, which I do think is a good point to bring up, that I'm pretty sure he's going to have multiple positional eligibility. So that's nice. He's the type of guy that you take if you're like, you know what? I'm good. I just want a steady flow. I want a guy that can maybe hit. He did hit 21 bombs last year, which isn't too bad. But I don't want to invest too much in that position because, in fairness, second base is a little shallow. It's a lot more shallow than I remember it being in the Brian Dozier days, who hit like, what did he hit that one year? Was it like 48 home runs? He was
He had like
so good that one.
44 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, he like 44, gave you 20 steals or something like that. Ozzy Albies, while he will potentially hurt you in batting average and on base, or at least definitely in on base percentage leagues, when it comes to his power, hit 30 bombs last year and had 20 stolen bags. So just for everybody that is wondering, while you could argue Jay Cronenworth is better, Albies is going to have those counting stats and be a top-level player in fantasy baseball.
I mean, like,
my view is just kind of, if you get him at the right price, that outside the top 10, I just think build around the rest of your team. He's just going to be steady. And he's going to be a guy that you're going to be like, oh, cool, today. And he drove in an RBI, maybe got me a home run and just doesn't kill me and batting average and on base every week. He didn't really go through too much of a cold stretch last year, which was good. Just a very steady player. But don't draft him with knowing what his real life ability is, because if you do that, you might be a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the thing with Cronenworth is he doesn't steal the bags that we need from a second baseman. Like Jazz Chisholm can realistically be a 25-20 guy. You're not getting that from Cronenworth. So it's a tough one. Yeah, he's a guy that's probably, being like rated accurately at his current ADP, but he's not a guy that I'm like, that's the guy I need to get as my second baseman.
Yeah, so if anybody's wondering why they're like, why is Jazz Chisholm ahead? It's because, like you said, 25-20, and with not a lot of speed on the base pass for a second baseman, that's why for Jay Cronenworth. And I don't think that there's any upside there potentially. He is not a very good base runner. So the last guy that I think I want to talk about really quickly, because I know it'll make longtime listeners of the pod happy. I cannot say him by name, but of course that is the first baseman for the Padres. You can say him, feel free to. If anybody's wondering, the only case to be made for him is if for some reason his 2020 comes back and he's been very healthy throughout his career, and if you want him as a bench piece who could maybe hit you 25 home runs in a pinch, if he stays fully healthy, then yes, the Padres first baseman is viable. Otherwise, you just stay very, very far away from him. Batting average department, he actually might not be bad in that situation. In on-base leagues, he would be bad. But in terms of the batting average, I actually forgot. Let me see. What did he hit last year? I forgot what the heck he hit. Was it 260? 270? That's not too bad. The problem, though, he had 280 in 2020 is what I'm remembering. But the 260 average, look, guys, first baseman is where you are supposed to get your crazy, crazy RBI power numbers. He's probably not going to give that to you. If you get him around that Chris Paddock range and you're like, screw it, let me have fun for when his BABIP goes out of control and every ground ball he hits gets through the infield, and then you're like, cool, this is fun for like 2 weeks. Otherwise, no, stay away. I'm not even going to try and make a case for him anymore.
Oh, man, dude, looking at his fly ball rate just like pisses me off. Like, Javi, you just went and ruined my day, man. Thanks.
Dude,
like,
it's pretty
I'm in a
rough.
Bad mood. This is like the time of the interview, like you see all those like hip hop interviews, and they're like, they get asked that one question, they're like, I'm out of here.
Yeah,
like, that's me right now.
Like, why you're killing me? It's not great. It's not great. And then when you look up the alternate universe of maybe Ty France being the first baseman, it hurts a little bit. A guy who hit 291, 368 last year. Not a lot of home runs, but 18 home runs. The fact that guy is so infinitely better of a pick than the current Padres first baseman is kind of illustrates where they are right now. But Colby, any last kind of fantasy picks, advice, or what have you? And just for a little bit of fun, how do you go about naming your fantasy team? Right? Because this is a crucial part. I hate it when people just have the, in this case, Team Olson, Team Reyes, right? They don't do anything differently. All right. I like creativity and coming up with stuff. What do you got for me?
I'm historically, I wouldn't say bad at naming my team, but I take a while to like get the vibe of my team and like
gotcha.
What's my name? What's the vibe of the league too? So I'm in a league right now where all of our team names are actually minor league teams, and my my team name is an ex indie ball team called the Bridgeport Bluefish. They're not even they don't even
awesome.
exist anymore, but that's my team name in that league. But yeah, you really just gotta get a vibe for the league. Like in fantasy football this year, for example, right? You guys were roasting the hell out of me for being a bad commish. So what did I do? I made my team 100% approval rating because I'm the commish, and you don't get to tell me how good of a job I'm doing. I'm doing the best job.
Yeah, I like that though. I like it when it doesn't have to, because I know some people say, well, you got to name it after a player. You don't have to do that.
No.
The amount of times everybody I know in my leagues thought they were so clever by naming their team the Utley Ducklings. Guys, stop.
Dude.
Everybody knows how to Google fantasy baseball team names.
Yeah,
Name it after a
don't
movie. Hey,
don't
I've
do
had
that.
some winners before, by the way. Yeah, don't do that. This past year, I think in fantasy football, I changed it to the Demons because a kid that I hate in my league now said I was a demon or whatever at some point. So after I won it all, I changed it to that. In our fantasy football league, it was the Reyes Dynasty. Called my shot, ended up winning the league. Because shout out Amon-Ra St. Brown and Cooper Kupp, just incredible stuff. Just that's all you need. Fantasy football, unlike fantasy baseball, fantasy football, you just get those like 1 or 2 guys you might win. It's just as simple as that. Sorry to break it to everybody. You just might have the best fantasy season in history.
So,
and I think what was another one? Friday Night Rights was one that I used to use all the time with David Wright. It was an all-timer. It's one of my favorites. I usually name myself King Reyes heading into the draft, and then afterwards I find out something else. But yeah, man, I mean, there's been some good ones out there. There's been some good. This Boyd's Life for Tyler Boyd in fantasy football. It's an old Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro movie. Just don't. I recommend to people either name it something dumb that is only like not dumb, but like it doesn't have anything to do with the name. Like Colby said, 100% approval rating, something silly. Or
inside jokes
think really
play
hard about a reference. Inside jokes play really, really well. That's what I would recommend.
And I do like if you're gonna use a player's name in the name, don't use like Otani or like a really basic one. Like go deep cut. Give me a player that's just like I was not expecting that. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I think I made in fantasy basketball this year. Mine was opening the third eye because I drafted Kyrie Irving. So everybody, I love naming my team names a whole bunch of stuff, and I hope you guys love hearing us talk about it. Colby, any last things you want to plug before we, shut this bad boy down?
Yeah, guys, go check out the new podcast under the Just Baseball Network, Not Gambling Advice. Me and Peter Apple are covering the entire fantasy baseball landscape preseason, and then as we get more into the season, we're going to be doing a lot more gambling coverage. But still going to be keeping up to date with everything fantasy baseball throughout the season, giving you pickups and whatnot. But yeah, go check that out. Just got up on Spotify yesterday, and we're on Apple and YouTube. We just released our first base ranking, so you can find the man who shall not be named on there. He is 29th. 29th. Below Bobby Dahlbeck. That's how low we've stooped.
Bobby Dahlbeck, who would literally murder your batting average almost single-handedly, but still a better option than the Padres guy because of the power potential. Colby, it's been a blast. Everyone, you can follow him on Twitter at Colby_Olson3 as well. And he's writing over at Just Baseball, a whole bunch of stuff. He does pitching breakdowns, which I very much like. Individual pitches, who has the best sliders, curveballs, stuff like that in the league. Fastballs, of course, too. Hopefully we'll see some Padres guys mentioned in future pieces.
Blake Snell was like, what did I have him at? 17th best pitcher in baseball going into next year?
Yeah.
Let's go.
For the top 20 pitchers in general. Yeah, man. I'm excited. I think that there's some good potential for this team, man. And definitely for fantasy and whatnot. And I'm looking forward to kicking your ass along with everybody else in the Just Baseball staff. I think it's going to be great when I win again, very secretly. I can't believe I called my shot with the damn football and I actually won. Anyway, it's been a blast, and that's about does it, everybody, for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Again, follow me at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. And if you want to see me flailing my arms around or whatever shirt I'm wearing, you can check out on YouTube as well, Locked On Padres on YouTube. And until next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful, my Friar Faithful homies. Take care.